Welcome to the NeuroMarvels. We are so excited to be back for another episode. I am Dr. Gwen Palafox with my beautiful and wonderful colleague, Dr. Dana Waters. Hi, Dana.
Oh, hi, Gwen. How are you? I've the check's in the mail for saying those wonderful
Oh,
things.
good. Yeah, make sure it's more than it was the last time. Hey, Dana. We were kind of landing our topic for today's episode, and there's been quite a few disruptions in the world lately, namely the Queen's passing. For many of my clients, that has been really challenging. But we were thinking about just talking about the kind of the impact of disruption on the life of people, especially if they're neurodivergent.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, things that change, things that affect your daily life. I was talking with Gwen before we went on the air about today is the first day I'm going back to my teaching job in person. Yes. And my routine, I haven't had my routine for 2.5 years. Everything from my shoes being covered with dust and having to deal with that to just wearing clothing I've unacclimated to. In Seattle here, we have a lot of wildfire smoke and things like that are global, like the Queen dying, affecting everybody. Yeah. And then we really started to talk about disruption of holidays approaching, right? Because those are usually pretty big disruptions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think I see this to be really related to the level of effort it takes for an individual to be regulated or stay regulated in a day. Right?
Yeah.
I find like the more effort it takes someone to stay regulated in a day, the more sensitive they are to disruptions, and the more or the more benign the disruption might appear to people. An example is like, during this time in the holidays, our grocery stores here have these scented pine cones, these cinnamon scented pine cones, and that has kept many of my clients out of a grocery store.
Wow.
Like just because it's so strong.
Yeah.
But something as simple as like a scented pine cone, what can happen? And so with those clients right now, we kind of predict that's happening. The problem is that's getting earlier and earlier. Like Christmas is getting earlier and earlier.
I saw a Christmas commercial.
Yeah.
A few days ago. Yeah.
And so we're just kind of doing our workarounds in regards to, can we order and pick up? Can we have a delivery? It just kind of depends on someone's budget.
So they're having a bigger window, though, that they're having to deal with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
We used to be able to predict that, after Thanksgiving, really. Like,
right.
We were sure that after Thanksgiving, that's when Christmas was going to start. But now it's just, it's starting so much earlier. Products, are coming out so much earlier. That it's just something that we've been really mindful about. But it's something as simple as that,
Yeah, and it depends on the piece that's overwhelming someone. So people that I know, and myself included, scent is one that just can hijack your brain. I've talked about going to a baseball game here where they sell these garlic French fries. And so there's this smell of garlic in the air the whole time you're there. And it's slightly not a great smell. And that'll set the stage, like for what you said. Anything else then that gets piled on top of that really, where they normally would be able to deal with it, or that neurotypicals think is fine. So their family or friends or whoever can't understand why this person's getting prickly or starting to have a meltdown, right? Not aware of those triggers. Yeah. And those changes happen sort of societally, like you're saying, at the grocery store and that kind of thing, a lot during the holidays, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the holidays, for many, a lot of people look forward to the holidays, but the holidays bring quite a bit of disruption, I think, into lives, right? There's stress. I just see the stress get kicked up.
Oh yeah. I mean, probably the biggest thing is just changes in routine. People going to parties or people being over at their house. Food changes because there's parties and holidays have different foods. Um, I've had clients talk about things like putting up, if you're someone that puts up a Christmas tree, that having that Christmas tree in the room is like one more piece of clutter that sometimes just throws people over the edge,
Mm-hmm.
or that constant people that have flashy lights on their tree. I never could understand how you could do that. We have lights on our tree, but not flashing.
Yeah.
Different things being in the house, whether they're scented or not, all those things can certainly contribute to sensory stimuli. And then you're spending, well, now since we haven't even hit Halloween yet, a month plus with those things going on, and in that constant state of agitation potentially if you're autistic and you have those sensory inputs that way that really bother you, right?
Yeah.
For me, over the years, I put up less and less decorations. It's pretty much just a tree. And we have a few little Department 56 houses that we put on the mantle, and that's it. And luckily for me, my wife agrees. She's like, yeah, less clutter, the better. And then, the day after New Year's Day, I take them down. I do love them. I love sitting in a dark room with the lights on. It's wonderful,
Yeah.
right? But that change, literal things like, can I dust the way I usually dust, or is it always there? Or if you have pets, oh my God, if you have pets that are like climbing your tree or knocking things over, there's more stress with the environment changing, even in your house. I have had clients stop decorating completely in their house, or maybe get like one of these little trees, or someone whose mother would put menorahs in every single room. And she just finally had to say, not in my bedroom. I need to be able to get away from this stuff. But scents would travel and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Vacations are as wonderful as vacations are. We get time off for holidays, and that is a disruption in routine because you're not, if you're working every day, you're not doing that, or things are changing, or people are wanting to go, let's go ice skating, or let's go to this thing and see this Christmas display, or a holiday display. I keep saying Christmas because I do Christmas, but the holidays in general for everybody are big changes in the environment, big changes in routine. I think are the big ones.
Yeah, the routine is a really interesting,
Mhm.
one. And I mean, I always feel like summer is really challenging because it tends to be, kind of
Mhm.
a long stretch of unstructured time, or
Mhm.
a long stretch of kind of patchwork kind
Yeah.
of scheduling, and that's really challenging. I think, you know, I think we've spoken about this before, but anyone that struggles with executive functioning in general, right? Or they
Mhm.
struggle with planning or keeping things in the top of their mind and juggling those things, keeping it conscious. You know, having a change in schedule is challenging because you can't kind of depend
Right.
on what you're expecting. This happens even at school, right? There's now these
Yep.
special assemblies. The class is changing because you might have a
Oh,
party,
sure. Yeah. Yep.
right? This is happening at school.
Yeah.
And I think the strategy here for many is try to get as much notice as you can.
Mhm.
If you have a little one, or you have someone that really struggles with that, or see if you can opt out in those moments.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
are some of those other workarounds that just kind of be mindful of it coming? I think
Yeah.
that's a big piece. We forget that all these things happen, like the pine cones in the grocery store, and you bring someone to the grocery store, and all of a
Oh my
sudden we're having a
God.
meltdown.
Yeah. 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 Predictability is always better. If you know it's coming, you can plan for it. Or you could, thinking about like social gatherings, you can decide which ones you're going to go to, or reset the expectations. All my friends know that if I do go to something like that, I don't usually stay the whole time. Or they've really gotten used to just my wife going now. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with our relationship. It's just like that, to be in that stimulating environment for that period of time. It's just, I can do it, but then I'm exhausted, and it's not fun, right?
Yeah.
All the different people I don't know in parties and things like that. I had a client yesterday tell me about a new kind of earplug. I think it's called Ring, I think. And it actually, you can't tell it's a earplug. It has like this little ring that sits in the inside of your ear, kind of like some headphones do. But it looks like earrings, kind of. It's almost like a piece of jewelry. And
Oh,
she said it was
cool.
great because the sound really, larger sounds get muffled. But if someone's sitting right next to you talking to you, you can make out what they're saying. But I liked it because she's really self-conscious about when wearing the big headphones, the noise canceling headphones,
Yeah.
and wanted an alternative. And I thought that's wonderful, right? That
Yeah.
some of those kinds of things are starting to come out. So we've talked about change in routine, but you mentioned executive functioning. When you don't have, what people don't realize is when you have executive functioning issues, if you don't have a routine or you can follow the path to get to the end, everything gets discombobulated. Like I mentioned this morning, having to my work schedule shifting again a little bit. But I let folks know that are neurotypical. I say, think about when you've traveled and you are staying in a hotel or something like that on vacation or whatever. And things like, wait, where's my toothbrush? And you have that sense of discombobulation. That's what it's like every day for somebody with executive functioning when they can't follow that routine. So if you change one thing, now you're like, where's my toothbrush for everything? So the ability, especially if you're talking about someone in school, the ability to tend to doing things in the right order really starts to suffer. So anything you try to do in a certain order tends to be, discombobulated. But it's that constant version of that, if that makes sense. And sensory overload can contribute to that. So if you walk in a grocery store and the pine cone smell, your brain can't focus on, the list of what you need to get. And, they move stuff around a lot in the stores around the holidays too. They're like, oh, it's on the end cap on aisle 4. And it's like, why? So that all takes a allostatic load, and then you go home exhausted and don't want to go back and that kind of thing. Let alone if you're dealing with somebody else at the store. Everybody gets a little stressed during the holidays, right? Having to deal with other people not in great moods and things like that. We can't overemphasize the challenge of all of that, right? Now, what we don't want to do is take away everybody else's fun, but like what you were saying, pre-planning, knowing what's coming, offering alternatives. What came to mind for me when you said like the school assemblies, knowing it's coming and maybe nowadays, especially, I'm sure you could video patch it and let someone participate by sitting in a classroom and watching on a video screen rather than going,
Yeah.
I think schools are getting better about understanding those needs, which is wonderful. It's taken forever. Workplaces, depends on the workplace, right? A little more resistant in that way. But yeah, when you don't have structured time and you're not following the same routine every day, that's like the kiss of death for decent functioning for someone that has executive functioning issues, right?
Yeah, and I've often seen rigidity, when someone says, "Oh, this person's just really rigid. They have to follow the schedule." I often see or kind of reframed rigidity as
people labeling it as rigidity, right?
Yeah. Or like I really have reframed it in my mind to compensatory, right? Like this is a compensatory tool. If I struggle with following a path, when it's not clear in front of me, right? What do? I get really clear on my path. And so, whenever I see some of that rigidity, and it is rigidity. I mean, that's maybe a derogatory way to say it, but it is, I need to stick to this, right? I need to stick to this
lack
plan.
of movement and lack of flexibility.
Right? Yeah. That usually indicates to me anyway that we probably have a few things going on, right?
Yeah.
We've got executive functioning pieces happening, or I can't think about multiple things at one time. Maybe that's just like a more global or more drone's eye view, bird's eye view of seeing this, right?
Yeah.
Which is I struggle with thinking about multiple things at once.
Right.
That's hard for me. And so I got to think about one thing at a time. And if I can only think about one thing at a time, I better know what I'm doing next.
Right. Well, that's the key, right? You could maybe think of one thing at a time, and then you finish that one thing and you're like, okay, now what?
I think that there's some pressure. Like most of my clients really want to be good and do good. I mean,
Yeah.
And so when they don't know how to do that, they don't have the
Yeah.
path
Yeah.
to do that. That's
Yeah.
very stressful. It actually
Yeah.
causes
So,
quite a bit of anxiety for them.
oh yeah, and it keeps going back to that idea of predictability. So like if you're going to go to the grocery store and they have those scented pine cone things, first thing that came to mind for me is, like you said, what is the compensatory strategy? You could have groceries delivered or whatever those are, but I'm thinking of, especially now since it's normative for people to be wearing masks. A
Yeah.
lot of people aren't, but and then again, I wish I could take credit for these ideas, but they're not mine. Someone putting a drop of a scented oil that she has that she does like on the mask. And then she could go into the grocery store and smell that instead of this other. And there's something about it being something you've chosen to smell that takes some of the angst out versus this thing that's just coming at you and you can't control. So that could be
Yep.
a way you can deal with some of those kinds of things. Food changes. People just have to get used to taking their own food to places, right? Or eating ahead of time. And the part is the families will be like, oh, you need to eat this, you need to eat this, and really explaining to them. I sort of talk about when I was diagnosed as gluten sensitive, so I can't eat gluten anymore. It was great because then I could say, no, I can't eat that. It has gluten in it. And that's why I bring my own food. It's easier. People understand that one, right?
Yeah.
That there isn't something like, oh, what's wrong with that person? They're not eating the food, but start to normalize that. The smells, if you're going to someone's house for a party or something like that, try to get outside, try to take like breathing breaks. Many years ago, when I would go to a relative's house and there were smokers, which would really bother me, they would always leave. They had like a porch room and they'd always not smoke out there, which was great because then I could at least get away from it. Lights and overstimulation. I've seen people wear, sunglasses.
Yeah.
And, just if you're going to a store and things like that, I don't think people, even if it's at night nowadays, I've seen people do stuff like that all the time and I don't even give it a second thought. And then this sense of if you have to do things like traveling, so you're absolutely out of your environment, right? Doing things like having your suitcase packed in a way where you know where everything is. And when you get to your destination, I never like unpack my stuff in a hotel. I always have it like in the suitcase so I know where everything is. Or if I do unpack it in the bathroom, I put things where they are in my normal bathroom. So there's at least some level of routine to that, which really helps. Right?
Yeah.
But it's all about pre-planning. And I would say it's also about pre-informing people that you're going to come in contact with so they know what the scoop is as well. Right?
Yeah. This goes back, Dana, to, I think a thread that we typically go back to, which is self-awareness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Self-awareness, self-knowledge. If you don't have self-awareness and self-knowledge, then none of this happens, right? You don't know when you need to pre-plan. You don't know when you need to get ahead. You don't know how to set expectations appropriately or how to advocate with others, right?
Right. Exactly.
And so that idea of really, if you have someone in your life that, is challenged by being able to know those things, and it now is, maybe your responsibility to help them with it, really coming up with some of these triggers. What are the triggers or what keeps someone regulated, and how what are the workarounds for that?
Yeah, and this will dovetail with another episode we're going to have about diagnosis and self-diagnosis is having that frame for other people to know that you're autistic helps a lot, I think, because it gives a frame for family and friends to understand, oh, this person has these issues and how can we accommodate those? It helps with self-awareness, where if you're newly diagnosed or you're not aware of your triggers, like you said, or you don't just have that body awareness, it helps to have other people around you be able to say, oh, this is normally hard for you. Are you good, or do you need something? But absolutely, if you're not aware of your own triggers, you're only going to have that accumulate to where you get to meltdown stage and then it's over, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And things that you might not think about. I got a COVID booster and a flu shot together on Friday.
Oof.
And half of the day Saturday, I was so irritable and prickly and didn't feel good. And my joints kind of hurt, which is a thing for me anyway. And finally I'm like, oh, duh. I think it's probably the vaccines. And then it just changed the frame. So I was still prickly. I was still sort of having some pain, but it took I was like, oh, it's the vaccines. Okay. So even knowing that you have that efficacy makes all the difference. If you choose to go into the grocery store, even though that bloody scent is in there,
Yeah.
but you're like, I'm going to do this. That is that locus of control, and you being in the driver's seat that is so important. And we've talked about in other episodes as well. Not like to be a control freak, to use that phrase, but to have efficacy and be the master of your body and your senses. And then, like you said too, now you get to make a choice. And we keep coming back to that as well. It's not something being done to you, but something you're choosing to do. And it changes everything.
I mean, I think that's a really important psychological concept, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, what is self-efficacy? And that idea of, I know myself and I know that I can trust myself to do what I need in a situation, right? Like that right. I can be effective in managing my own life, that kind of idea of self-efficacy. And this idea of locus of control, what can you control? I always, it's often whenever I'm talking about control with a client, I always feel like we're 12-stepping, it's like, what can you control? What can you not? Let go of the things you can't, it's that idea, but it really is an important framework, which is to let go of the things that you can't control and only focus and put your energies in what you can.
Yep. Yeah, that's hard. I mean, you're right. That idea of being able to let go with things you can't control, but knowing the difference, right? If we're going to stay with that 12-step serenity prayer, the last line is the wisdom to know the difference. I was so excited this summer to go to one of our big conferences, had it all planned, had my tickets all ready to go. And then I tested positive for COVID. And that was really hard because it was like the sense of, this is so not fair. And, which it wasn't. And then my wife is really great to remind me. She's like, well, it wasn't your fault. There's nothing you could do about it. You can't rewind the clock. And I'm like, that's true. So it didn't mean I didn't grieve the loss of that, because I really wanted to see people again. But there's almost all those steps that you have to go through to, can I control this? Can't I? Oh my gosh. And if you're talking about kids, right? Kiddom, the whole childhood realm, you can't control, right? Because you just can't. So a lot of that is getting used to that. And then also, I see the biggest barrier in my adult clients, because I work with adults, isn't them, it's family, right? Because understandably, family's going to get frustrated, or they just don't understand. Like, I don't understand why when you walk into Safeway and that smell is there, it's so nice, it's Christmassy, what's your problem? Versus, it is pretty strong, it doesn't bother me, but, right? And that sense of non-judgment, again, that we've talked about so many times too, where instead of judging the other person and saying, what's your problem for feeling this way? Move into helping in whatever way you can, right? So you really do, it's not, yes, it's self-awareness. It's that locus of control. Can you do anything about that self-awareness that you have now? Like, can you change the environment? And can you get the help of people in the environment? Those are, and oftentimes family is the biggest barrier. And as we're talking about the holidays, I think that's the perfect storm, because you're going to be spending a lot of time in those environments with people that are stressed also, because they're going through the holidays, and they may not be as available for you either, right? So you have to really be an advocate for yourself.
Yeah, which is its own difficulty, right? I mean, kind of going back to executive functioning, keeping something at the top of your consciousness and then doing something with it.
So hard.
Right? Yeah. And sometimes, advocacy or saying what you need for many has not resulted in a positive, supportive response. So many of my clients are just honestly scared. They're scared to say anything. They'd rather just withdraw and not be engaged because it's easier. and it's
Yeah.
not so scary, and it's not so hard.
Yeah.
I think what sucks is when they want to be there, or they want to go, or they want to be, they want to show that they care. They want to, they want to do these things. But there's not an understanding.
Yeah.
I read this really great, was it a blog post or an email? And it was this kind of idea of like moving away, like when someone has this inclination to give advice that's unsolicited, instead of giving advice, can you understand? Can you ask questions to understand where that person is and where they're coming from? I thought that was really fantastic,
Yeah.
because
No statements allowed, only questions. I love that.
Questioning, like let's question that, and question it in a curious way, not question it in a hidden judgment, because sometimes I think,
your problem?
hey, what's your problem is a question. Yeah, exactly. But it was like really interesting to me because I just thought, what a neat little shift, First of all, no one likes unsolicited advice. I mean, let's just be honest, But I do find that what happens to my clients often is advice is given. Well, just, you know what? Just deal with it, or just walk around it, or don't walk in that door, or, they're already moving to like what to do when they actually don't fully understand. And to be fair, sometimes like some people have a difficult time expressing themselves. Like, right. There's not an understanding.
Especially, the younger you are, the harder it is to put things into words. And I think I take it for granted a little bit as a psychologist, but that's really that's one of our major tools, is being good at using language and asking questions and wanting to get in there, or to explain things in a way that makes sense to another person. I mean, we probably gravitate towards this field because we're good at it, and we get a lot of training on it. So it isn't easy to do. I mean, I really want to kind of make sure our listeners understand that we're making it sound easy, like, oh, just ask questions. The words you use and the tone you use and all of that, people can get hung up on. Like, oh, should I say this? Should I say that? I said, don't focus on what you should or shouldn't say. Just love that person and ask from your heart, like you said. Be curious. You want to know this person better. How would you ask the question if you focus on it that way? Stay in that centered place of, oh, I care about this person. And then they're like, oh, and then if you ask a question from that place, it sort of naturally happens. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, and that speaks so much to the power of nonverbal communication and how much of our communication is like really mostly nonverbal. It is in the tones and our the way we sound, the way we look, the way our face looks, these types of things. And I feel like emotions are transmitted. You don't need consent for emotions for you to feel someone else's emotions. They happen. They transmit. And so authentically, are you caring? And I do. I agree with you. That comes through. Yeah.
Or the vice versa. If someone is irritated and mad at you, they can say all the right words. What do you need right now? Isn't gonna be friendly. You're not gonna want that.
I mean, I think today is kind of like our little bit of our cautionary tale. It's and it's one of the reasons why we started this podcast in the first place, right? How do we encourage people to stay open and curious, non-judgmental? How do we do that in a place where people are differently wired? And that's not a choice. And I think that sometimes people are like, oh, this is a choice. I mean, our one of our previous episodes, we talk about, autism really becoming more of a medical, neurological kind of diagnosis where, you understand, you have an understanding when it's that way. But this one is not, autism isn't typically seen in that way. And I do think that the diagnostic understanding category is expanding and morphing in a way that we haven't seen ever. in this
And
label.
we're seeing representation, so people are understanding it better too.
Yeah. So that's, so there's some evolution here in regards to
I think people are also learning a lot about it online and in social media. I have so many clients whose friends, surprise, when they've come out as autistic and start talking about their stuff, their friends are like, that kind of sounds like me, right? So people are learning about it more than they ever have, which is perfect because then people understand better. There's a new character in Thomas the Train. Did you see this?
Oh, no.
They're having a new autistic character. It's the brake car or something. And the best part is the actor, the little kid actor, is an autistic actor. So I'm like, every time we can have one of those little bits of representation, that changes things. So that's awesome.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, if anyone, I would if you, and what might be really interesting here is, if you're listening to this and, you want to kind of highlight or, even leave it in the comments below. What are your disruptions? What are the disruptions you wish people knew about? What are the disruptions you didn't realize until maybe even listening to this? And, for us, a big thing is just let's bring to awareness that the holidays are disruptive anyway.
Yeah, I like that.
How do they impact individuals who are in this world in a different way that may become very overwhelmed very quickly? They're not Christmas haters.
Or holiday haters.
They're not holiday haters. But man, the world's already hard to be in. And so adding this other level now and it's now extending, into October, like early October, right? September, I should say. We're in September still, but
it's only September.
Right. I'm seeing things in September for the holidays. So
I'm
saying it's 2 months earlier than like what we might anticipate, that maybe come at that from a place of curiosity, true, authentic curiosity versus judgment, and, make that adjustment if you can. That would be my encouragement anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And plan ahead. That's the other big take home with this.
Yeah. Plan ahead, get in front of it. And if you don't know, then just be conscious about it, bring it to forward attention. What does trigger me? When do I feel really uncomfortable, and what's usually happening? But well, again, thanks everyone for being here and listening to this episode. Again, if you want or have a topic that you want Dana and I to cover, please leave that in the comments below. The best way to really support Dana and I would be to, if you're on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. And if you're listening to us just through your ears, leaving a comment and liking or loving our, episode. If you do, we're not asking you to not do that, right? Please do that. That's really helpful. And we want to hear from you. So interact with us.
Be great to hear from you. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Bye, everyone.
Happy holidays.